All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This episode is brought to you by Progressive, where drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average. Quote now at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, national average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody African. This day, October 7th, 2016, the Washington Post published a 2005 recording of Donald Trump casually bragging about how easy it was for him to sexually assault women. This is the Access Hollywood tape, which landed about a month before the 2016 election. It caused total chaos amidst a fall that was basically total chaos. It also caused the Trump campaign to scramble and arrange for the release of a trove of Hillary Clinton emails and try and muddy the news cycle. I can hear the stress levels among our listeners rising as I simply describe the basic facts of this one day in 2016. But I don't know, let's pick at that scab, shall we? Here to do it, as always, are Nicole Hemmer of Columbia and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
And our special guest for this episode is Roy Wood Jr., brilliant comedian and actor and correspondent on The Daily Show, among many other things. Roy, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. That was quite a day.
That was quite a day. We will get into it. I will also say, though, part of what Roy's going to do on this episode is going to tie this story, believe it or not, to Major League Baseball, slightly related to a project that Roy and I are working on. We will get there. We will build to that. But Roy, let's go back to that day, 2016. I feel like this is one of those I will always remember where I was when type stories. And so I'm curious just where you were when you heard this. But then also, Roy, did you initially process it as human being processing news or professional covering the election for The Daily Show?
Ooh, it's always personal first. Like, I always process news just as a regular person. And then I have to wait, oh, damn, I need to put on my professional hat real quick and figure out how can I make this funny? And, where in this story is everyone angry? What is everyone saying about it? It's what I feel. What is everyone saying? And then I land on, based on all of that data, how can I make this funny with my own unique take? Now, The Daily Show, there's a ton of writers. There's a ton of producers. There's about 6 at the time. We were 6 correspondents. Yeah, we had a full, as I call it, a full rack. We had all 6 correspondent positions filled. Everybody had a different opinion about this damn thing. So people are running around the building. There's certain days where news breaks and it pushes everything else off the schedule for the day. Because the way The Daily Show works, you kind of have an idea it's like planning dinner for your family for the week. You know, Thursday's chicken, Friday's lasagna. You don't know what the side items are going to be, but you know you got the basic bones of what you want to follow. And then, we just got a whole free shipment of ground beef. Well, you know what? We're not having chicken anymore. Ground beef just fell into our laps. So that was probably one of those days for us. And it was hilarious. My first thought, if you want to know my first thought, when I heard the tape, I had two thoughts out the gate. Number one, who the hell is Billy Bush? That's my first thought. Because I don't watch these shows. Him being relevant for whatever reason and whatever he was already doing on TV as a media personality in a time slot where I'm usually dealing with my child. So I don't know who you are. And I don't say that in disrespect to his career accomplishments up until that point, but it is what it is. Second thing I thought was, we got his ass. Election over. Advantage Hillary.
The race is over.
Yeah, I was like I was trying to find the joke. I'll even tell you the joke that I was pitching at the time. The Tom Cruise iteration of War of the Worlds. And it's been long enough, so I'm gonna spoil it. You should have watched it. The aliens wreak havoc. They tear up everything, killing everybody. Chaos, chaos, chaos. And then in the end, it was something as simple as water that killed them. It was like rainfall or something. It rained or something, and it killed them. And I was like, this tape is the rainfall. Like, who would have thought, like, of all of the different political angles, and you're trying to attack him on policy points, and he's not a real politician, and like at that point in the campaign for Hillary, she was all but saying, like, come on, y'all, damn. I've been around this for 40 years. And I was like, good for Hillary. Good for you.
Well, and I think that reaction that this was the end of the campaign, like it was done, that after all of this time, this finally did it, was something that a lot of people felt, including congressional Republicans, who had somehow stuck by Donald Trump throughout all of this. But even people like Paul Ryan, who at the time was the Speaker of the House, was just like, I can't condone this. He canceled an event with Donald Trump. And of course, not to spoil it for everyone, but Donald Trump still wins the election. And so I think it's one of those moments that taught all of those Republicans, just don't say anything about it, no matter how bad it looks. Like, he's going to weather the storm, and you're not going to win any points for being like, he's a horrible man who should never have any power.
Yeah. But that was also the first real missile shot at the Trump regime that we believed would be damaging. Like, finally we get it's that first missile in Independence Day after they put the virus and whatever, and that single missile hits the force field again, and you're like, what?
All of Roy's analogies are just to alien movies. That's what we're learning over the course of this conversation.
I was just gonna say, I love the analogies.
But this is like the movie Cocoon with Steve Gutenberg in the 80s.
I don't know what was more shocking to me, the comment and Bush's laughter after that, and just the whole, like, the tape itself, or the fact that it didn't have the intended outcome. So I was like, okay, so we all hate women now. Like, what is this? That, I think, was tougher to swallow, the fact that he won. Or not just won, the fact that it didn't have that sort of takedown effect that I thought it would.
Yeah. I mean, this is the origin story of the Me Too movement, right?
Yeah.
Like, this, followed by Hillary's loss, I think, really drove home that point that women don't matter.
Right. Well, and the Billy Bush, I mean, it was interesting that there was a whole sort of, like, narrative about Billy Bush that erupted for a couple of days as part of this. But I think the Billy Bush behavior in that tape gets at exactly what we're talking about here. And frankly, the part of this whole story that made me most despondent, and the part of Trump's win that made me most despondent, which was just an understanding of how willing people are to put up with awful, awful behavior for the sake of sucking up to power or political tribalism or all these other much more cynical, expedient things. And I think, to me, that was just to your point, Roy, this was a reminder of like, this is a fundamentally awful person, but everyone is finding a way to look the other way or find other things to help them make that compromise. One thing that helped make people make that compromise was this very strategic, savvy move by the Trump campaign. And it was Roger Stone, we now know, who put in a call to WikiLeaks and basically said, hey, dump those emails out, because it allowed, within hours, Nikki, to your point, to just have just a little bit of ammunition and a little bit to hold on to and say, well, but, and then do this other sides thing with the emails. And I wonder if you have thoughts there, Roy, about just sort of the amalgam then all of a sudden, just a couple hours later, this other thing coming out and being in this crazy fog of trying to cover this thing.
Yeah, it was like, what? It, in a way, it played into Trump's hand, because I think what the Democrats didn't realize at the time was that this was not someone whose reputation you could attack and expect that to disassociate him with the base that he was building. And, base Republicans were going to go for Trump just, for lack of better options. All they had to do to win the election was to create doubt with Hillary, with centrists. And that's what they were able to accomplish. And the emails kind of pushed that, that was the tipping point, and I think that in a lot of ways we look back at this Access Hollywood tape as this one granular moment in the Trump campaign, when to me it's really the beginning of the end of Hillary's campaign. Is really what this day in history denotes. The next 4 to 5 years of political policy and Supreme Court justices and women's rights and Roe v. Wade and troops and money, broke-ass infrastructure. Like, it comes down to two men giggling on a tour bus in 2005.
Yeah, and I would add to that, a couple of days later, there's a presidential debate, and Donald Trump did something pretty awful and pretty savvy by bringing out all of the women who had leveraged accusations, who had made accusations against Bill Clinton. Yeah. And Bill Clinton was another one of those Bill Clinton did terrible things. And, a lot of different people protected him, including often feminists in the 1990s. And it was an atrocious thing to bring those women to a debate with Hillary Clinton. It had nothing to do with her. It was like deeply misogynistic and gross. And yet, just like with WikiLeaks, media outlets fell for it. And it just became part of the narrative.
The spin and also the trivialization of the comment, oh, that's just locker room talk. It just got sort of chalked up to this being like playful banter that shouldn't be taken seriously, that shouldn't be like some sort of signal to sexual harassment or sexual assault. And then everything else that should have been sort of like, pushed to the margins was pushed to the center. And no longer the conversation is happening about this egregious conversation that just took place.
Well, it's like the instinct among mostly the conventional press, this both-sider instinct, and this both sides equally large and serious. And so in a way, I think, Roy, you were sort of hinting at this, but the absurdity of what we were seeing with the Trump campaign day to day actually worked in their favor, in that there was an instinct that every sort of tidbit that came out about the Clinton campaign got elevated to this sense of it was just as big and just as epic and just as crazy, because there's this instinct to say, well, both sides have to balance each other out. Whereas, I think the real way to approach it is to say one side is hugely crazy and one side is minorly crazy, right? But that just isn't baked in. And I think the Trump campaign, particularly the operatives around Trump, but, at some level, Trump understands that deep DNA among the press to just talk about both sides equally in terms of scale and impact.
Yeah, there's definitely, I'm just kind of looking at Billy Bush's Wikipedia now.
Are you the only person in the world currently on Billy Bush's Wikipedia page?
You never want the scandal paragraph to be longer than the rest of your early career.
Your bio.
Paragraph.
It really prefigures the obituary.
Yeah, man.
The thing I always wonder, though, because Billy Bush is all tied in with the Bush family and all of that, You ever wonder if like the Bush family reunions, they just look at him as like, way to almost ruin it for the party.
Yeah. Look, I started a war, and I only got elected one time, but you did this thing in that bus that one time.
Oh, man.
Meanwhile, Jeb Bush is like,
back.
thank God for this guy.
Yeah.
I know. Oh,
Billy
God.
Bush is outside on the kids' table eating with Laura. Is it Laura and Jenna Bush? The Bush daughters.
Oh, man. I mean, he kind of gets canceled after this moment, at least briefly, you know. But nothing, Teflon for Trump. Nothing seems to really stick.
It is worth pointing out, look, when the election is what ends up being this close, I think people weirdly forget how close and like ass backwards Trump fell into winning this election. But when it is that close, there are a million things you can point to that say, oh, it moved the needle one way, it moved the needle the other way. I think there is a good argument to be made that this was one of the few things that actually did at some level move the needle, especially, you know, as we came to see the kinds of voters who abandoned Trump, women in the suburbs or whatever. You know, I think that this really did turn a lot of people off, but it wasn't enough to, you know, to get over the electoral college, basically. But, you know, I think this and the debates, I think, genuinely did have basically the times when we saw who Trump really was. It turned a good number of people off, but enough people, as I was saying before, were able to make that sort of moral compromise and still vote for him. I want to get back to some of the details of the tape itself because, Roy, we did an episode about a week ago about a very weird racist rant that Gerald Ford's agriculture secretary went on, Earl Butz, and he talked about how black people only want tight pussy, loose shoes, and a warm place to shit was his very strange form of racism. There was some, I'll be honest, like weird.
I think a lot of us also want tight. I think a lot of us also want tight shoes that fit really well around the feet.
Exactly.
Large support, but continue.
But there's some weirdness in this tape too. Like, you know, again, not that this is the main focus, but just to like grab them by the pee is just a very weird form of. Like, is that a move? Like, I remember, I'll be cop to that being part of my reaction too, just being like, what is this, his move here? And then he has this whole thing about like, well, I keep Tic Tacs around just in case I want to start kissing people. And then Tic Tac had to issue a statement saying like, we want nothing to do with this. I mean, again, it's just like very Baroque, awful behavior.
But that's how like in a fervor people were getting with Trump, that like people, like the moment Trump mentions your name, you have to like immediately as a corporation, we didn't tell him to say that. That's not the purpose of Tic Tacs. It's not for just kissing people randomly. It's to help your breath, please, Lord God. Every day, I'm sure the people at Diet Coke were praying he would shut up.
Get that button removed from the Oval Office. Protect their reputation.
Yeah, I just think that it really did. It was so ridiculous. And like, that's also, you know, part of this is that this was also an elevation of the wild stuff that Trump had been saying, you know, I mean, because at this point, you know, I've never seen a skinny person drinking diet. Like if you just look at all of the craziness that he called Ariana Huffington unattractive. Like he's just random gibberish out of his mouth. And this was after some of the Apprentice contestants had kind of come out and was like, yo, he's a little touchy-feely. He's a weird one, this one. But yeah, it definitely, this was an elevated moment in terms of the ridiculousness of, I'm sorry, he said what now? Yeah. Because the other thing that this kind of fired off, this was coming on the heels, and I remember this distinctly at The Daily Show. We did a rap song, like Trump was so bombastic, we were able to put together a rap song compiled of just Donald Trump quotes to show just how braggadocious and how gaudy and how like just everything that you think a rap song is, Trump has said, and we will prove it by putting it all to a beat. And this is before Grab 'em.
Yeah.
So he was already on a level, and then he just found another level to rock it up to, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, settle down.
It's interesting that it has this kind of, I think the reason why the tape mattered so much was because it was him speaking in private, where all of those other things were things that he had spoken publicly. And so people would talk about it as his persona, but this had that extra quality of being something we weren't supposed to hear. But at the same time, that kind of over-the-top language almost works like a defensive shield. If he had been sitting there detailing how he had sexually harassed and raped these 20 accusers that had come forward, I think the reaction would have been different in some way than this kind of ridiculous way of talking about it.
Yeah, but it also goes, I mean, he repeats himself a lot. So before he makes his comment, he says, you can do anything. Then he makes the comment, and then he says it again, you can do anything, right? And it's the same thing that he said, I could shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue, and it wouldn't, my supporters are that loyal. And, at first I was kind of like, this is ridiculous. And now I'm like, this is January 6th, right? Like, I can send out people to just do whatever, and they will do it. Whether he does it or whether he sends people to do it just shows you like how he's able to maneuver in the world without consequence. To me is just mind blowing. I can't accept it, but it is what it is.
He tricked them all. Like, even now, like, people still think he's like, I can't wait to see Trump on a Southwest flight boarding group B. And I get to walk up to him and go, hey, man, I got A41. I'm in front of you. There's no better feeling in life than just having a higher boarding card number. That's real power. Excuse me, Mr. President. I need you to get the hell back.
The bees are over there.
One other little tidbit that's just, Trump never denied the reality of this tape until like a full year and some later, where he started to just like, he was just giving interviews and be like, well, you know what, maybe that tape wasn't real. And like in November 2017, he gives an interview where he's just like, well, that could have been fake or whatever. And it's just this license to just basically say whatever the hell you want, I think is such a defining hallmark of this man and what he did to our culture, or what he revealed about our culture. As we start to wrap up, I promised that we would work our way to baseball, and here's my attempt to do that. So I was in Chicago the night of the Friday that this tape came out. We were doing a live show in Chicago with the 538 podcast. We had this crazy streak at the 538 podcast of huge news breaking on the night of live shows. It was like Brexit, like a bunch of other stuff had happened. And so we were literally sitting there being like, I wonder what's going to happen. And then like 11 a.m. this comes out. And then like 5 p.m., an hour before we were doing the show or whatever, the emails come out. And I remember, and I'll be honest, like I remember not having enough time to get my head around that and saying that on stage, but still having that instinct of like, well, I kind of got to talk about both these things. I mean, like whatever political instinct you have was being hacked in real time, but it was just because we didn't have enough time. We hardly talked about it and sort of didn't play the both sides. We mostly focused on the tape. But we were in Chicago that night. That night was the first game of the Chicago Cubs 2016 playoff run. I remember giving live updates to the score of the game from stage to people. And then the next day, I went to Game 2, a Cubs game, and had just like kind of wonderful, magical sports experience at Wrigley Field. And they won, and it was very feel good, and it was a nice little escape. I'm mentioning all of this because, A, the Chicago Cubs are wrapped up with my memories of this moment, but also this is the podcast I'm working on with Roy Wood Jr., a deep Cubs fan, and we're doing this episode. We're doing this series called The Run about the 2016 Chicago Cubs run. They broke a 108-year curse, but among the many things that are interesting of it, the real world is falling apart while the Chicago Cubs are doing this epic, magical thing. And Roy, I'm just curious, kind of like, we talk about it on the podcast, but I wonder if you can just share a little bit here about how you balanced and how you felt like people in Chicago were balanced, and just all of us were balancing this sort of like watching the world fall apart while also wanting to hold on to these very special other things.
Chaos with just something loving, like, watching the Cubs in the playoffs during the 2016 election, it's like petting a kitten during a roller coaster.
What?
Having a warm, cuddly kitten in your hand, and when you look into his eyes, nothing else matters, and the world is still. And for a split second, You break eye contact. That's the off days between Cubs games. You break eye contact with that kitten, and it's, oh my God, I'm not even wearing a seatbelt. What is happening? And that's what it was like. That's the only thing that I can compare it to. And, and that was also, like the SNL was on fire too. Like every Saturday night with the election, they were killing everything. Mm-hmm. So like that part of it was like, I was like, oh, this is great for comedy. That's how early it was. We still thought that this crazy chaos. Hey, isn't Trump great for comedy? Oh, I think so. We can make some jokes. No, by midterms we wanted off that ride. But it definitely, watching baseball during that time, it just felt like anything is possible in this world.
Right.
And the Cubs win the World Series, and then like the unthinkable happens one week, and then the following week another unthinkable thing happens.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Yeah. And I mean, at 538, where I was at the time, a site that covers sports and politics, the win percentage for the Chicago Cubs at the very end of Game 7, which they end up winning, was eerily similar to Donald Trump's win percentage. And so there was just this sort of like, well, stuff that has a 1/3 chance of happening or a 20% chance of happening, those things happen. And we just saw it in sports, and maybe we'll see it in politics. But, I would encourage people to go listen to The Run. I think it's really wonderful, even if you don't love the Cubs or love baseball, because it really gets at some of these bigger thematic things. It is also, this is my chance to plug my theory that somewhere in mid-2016, the worlds diverged and the sports timeline got really good and the real world timeline went to absolute shit. But sports has been really good since 2016, whereas everything else has been falling apart. And I think to Roy's point, like, every once in a while it's nice to just gaze into that kitten's eyes and remember that there are good things.
Hold on to that.
Yeah, and just remember and forget that you're on a roller coaster with no seatbelt and there's 5 loops coming up.
All right, that brings us to the end of the episode. Roy, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
It's so good. Thank you all.
Which, by the way, this has been really fun was not what a phrase I was expecting to utter at when I started this episode. But yes, Roy, thank you.
Fair.
Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kelly Carter-Jackson, thanks to you as always.
My pleasure.
And shout out to whoever put this terrible picture of Billy Bush on his Wikipedia. He deserves better.
Now I'm going to have to check it out.
I know. The revenge of the Wikipedia editors.
I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the to do anything.
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. What is Odoo? Well, Odoo is an all-in-one management software with apps for every business need. Odoo has apps for CRM, accounting, sales, HR, inventory, manufacturing, and everything in between. And they're all in one easy-to-use software. And the best part about Odoo? All Odoo apps are integrated, helping you get things done faster and more efficiently. So, when you think about business, think Odoo. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday.
Radiotopia. From